And you're on.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the June 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Millis Select Board. And I can report, based upon election returns, that we are no longer doing business as a Select Board, but the charter has been amended and we are the Select Board. So thanks to all who participated in the project that we went through to make that happen for the town of Millis. I'd also like to take the opportunity to congratulate our new member, Erin Underhill, who's a new member of the board, who will now be completing her 22-hour transition period, complete from election to a meeting the next night. But we would like to welcome her, and I would like to ask Erin if there's anything she'd like to say about her election.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for all the support and the votes. I'm very excited to be able to serve the town, and I think we're going to have a really good 3 years. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So first item on our agenda tonight is announcements and review of the town's situation relative to the emergency management issues around COVID-19. I'll ask the town administrator to give us an update on what is going on and what's happened over the last week or so and what's going to happen over the next week or so. So, Mr.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you. I just wanted to give a very brief update. As most of the residents know, the governor has recently declared our entrance into phase 2, step 2 of the reopening plan. And I think the most notable part of that for the average citizen is that indoor dining at restaurants is back, again with certain distancing and certain precautions such as face masks at certain times. But as far as the town hall, the Veterans Memorial Building is concerned, I did want to let residents know that if they do have business they'd like to conduct with a certain department in the town hall and it needs to be conducted in person for whatever reason, they may contact that department and ask for an appointment and be met at the door at a certain time by a person from that department and brought into the building for any appropriate municipal business. So that is effective immediately. If anyone has needed business with the town that needs to be conducted in person. And we will ask that anyone coming in for such an appointment wear a proper face mask and carry out proper social distancing while they're here doing business. And the town we will be looking at a time when we will be opening our doors for walk-in business again at the town hall, but that won't be until sometime after we enter phase 3. We will be looking at that, and once the governor declares a phase 3, the town will review it and will make a decision on the date at which time it will be open for walk-in business again. So I just wanted to update the community on that, answer any questions that the board has in regards to that. I have discussed this with the health director, and he has okayed that approach. So I don't know if anyone has any questions in regards to that.
Questions from anyone? So we will certainly post the information on the website, so we'll keep people informed about operations in the Veterans Memorial Building as well as in the other buildings around town. Still a developing situation, but hopefully we're on the right side of this, the downside rather than the upside, which is certainly the case when you look at the number of cases. So thank you very much, Mr. Gazinski. And again, thanks to the people of this town who voted yesterday in an election that turned out to be quite a good turnout. We had hundreds of absentee ballots, and as well as hundreds of people who came to vote on Election Day. And I want to thank everybody who worked so hard to make that happen, our election team, and not only the veterans, but also those who stepped forward and were trained. And we have a new group that's come in to help us out, and we want to thank all of those, including some students from Millis High who helped us out. So thanks to everyone for that operation, and I think it's clearly a success story for the town. So the next item of business for the town will be, for the meeting, is the election or reorganization of the board. Every year after the election, we organize the board for a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. So the first order of business will be to elect a board chair for the coming year. And I will ask if one of my colleagues has a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Jim McCaffrey as our next chair.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to designate myself as the chair. I will call the roll of the board for the vote. Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. So we have a new board chair. The next item will be nominating a vice chair. I would like to move that the board nominate Mr. Peter Jermaine to serve as the vice chair for the coming year.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll call the roll. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. Jermaine?
Thank you, yes.
So the motion is carried, and Mr. Jermaine will serve as the vice chair. Now comes the all-important critical position. So I would like to make a motion that the board elect Aaron Underhill to serve as the clerk of the board of the select board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll call the vote, call the roll. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Jermaine?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
So that motion carries as well. So now have the new board organization in place for the coming year. So thanks for all of us who have worked to get this done. We do have two scheduled hearings, or one hearing and one scheduled appointment, but we're not at that time yet. So I'm going to move the agenda to the next item, which is item 20-24, which is the appointment of water sewer technician.
Yes,
Mr. Yazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to talk a little bit about an opening in the department that we'd like to have an individual appointed for. This is for a water and sewer technician with the DPW. I did speak with the DPW director in regards to this, and in your packet you do have an application from Michael Hillary for this position. As the board may recall, this is one of the positions as part of the reorganization covered under the contract with the DPW union, and Mr. Hillary has come forward for this position. He does have all the qualifications and licenses needed to perform the duties associated with the position of water and sewer technician. And I'd be asking the board to ratify my appointment of Mr. Hillary to that position. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe the DPW director is also on the call. If he has any comments in regards to Mr. Hillary's qualifications for this role.
Yes, Mr. McKay?
So I would second the town administrator's appointment. Michael has worked with us for the past, I would say, 7 years, and he does have all the qualifications. It actually is above, he actually has higher qualifications than what we are required for that position.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members?
Yes, if I may.
Mr. Jermaine?
Are we backfilling a position, or is this a new position?
It was an open position when we created the water and sewer superintendent position, and this is just filling that position. So it's not a new hire. It's and it's not a created position either.
Right. So the headcount remains the same within the department.
Correct.
And do we have anyone else with credentials similar to this in the water sewer area?
Yes, we actually have 4 other people that could fill this position. Michael's the senior most qualified person to fill the position. So actually, we do have 3 other, including himself.
And is there a reason why we haven't filled this position previously?
We just created the water and sewer superintendent position. We couldn't do it all at once because I wasn't sure if, the board was going to appoint Ron McKinney as the water and sewer superintendent. So it was like a cascade. You have to wait, post a position, and that's just what we did.
Thank you.
Questions? Well, then I will entertain a motion for the board to approve the town administrator's appointment of Michael Hillary to serve as the water and sewer technician.
I so move that Michael Hillary be appointed to serve in that position of the water sewer.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded for the board to approve the town administrator's appointment of Michael Hillary for the position of water and sewer technician. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
The motion is carried. Next item is summer help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item, I am requesting that the board ratify my appointment of John Garaci for a temporary position of summer help, starting on June 24th and ending on September 30th. This is one of the standard positions we have for summer help, for seasonal assistance we have for the DPW. And I think the DPW director will discuss a little bit the different roles. I think this brings up to the point of having 3 members for summer help, but one of them will be working on the DPW project. So, Mr. McKay, I didn't know if you wanted to discuss that a little bit.
Sure. So this is the second position for the that we're paid under the personnel plan. The third position, we have a candidate, but we have not received all his paperwork. And that third position will be paid, and it was approved at the permanent building committee meeting, the last permanent building committee meeting, that those funds will be taken out of the project to assist. I think if anybody takes a look at the DPW garage, you can see that a lot of work has already been undertaken by the staff. And as part of that project, there's almost $607,000 worth of labor that the DPW staff has to incur for that project to keep it under budget. And that one position will help, and there may be others depending on the workload and how fast the bid goes out and we get to work on it. But so right now, this is just for the second DPW staff position.
So my first question will be to the director and to the town administrator. Again, these positions are budgeted for 2021. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they are positions for which there's budgeted expenditure already in place.
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
Well, assuming that the budget actually...
Well, it's in the recommended budget.
In the recommended budget, I should say, yes. Any other questions from members of the board?
Yes, sir. May I ask a couple?
Mr. Germain?
Do these individuals understand that given the financial situation and potential lack of funding from the state, that they may be curtailed earlier than anticipated?
Absolutely. And what would happen, that we would shift these positions to the building project so that we wouldn't lose them. That funding's already in place, so that's another reason why we haven't filled that third position till after July 1st to see. And if budgets get cut even after July, they understand that they would be the first to go, yes.
Other questions? All right, then we should make a motion. I can make it if it's okay with my colleagues. I would make the motion that the board approve the town administrator's appointment of Mr. John Garaci as a temporary seasonal summer help, starting June 24th and September 30th, 2020, provided that funding continues to be available throughout the summer. This is subject to Mr. Garachi completing a physical and a drug test.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded that the board approve the town administrator's appointment. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. We still have some time here, so the next item on the agenda really is a review and approve the common victular license for Nirvana Tea House Cafe. I think we had Mr. Williamson on the line earlier. Hopefully.
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. So this is a request for license granting new establishment in town. I'd like to start by asking our operations manager, Karen Beret, to, dare I say, set the table for the conversation.
Ooh, dad joke. I like it. Yes, so we were approached by Mr. Ed for his new business.
We were approached by Mr. Ed.
Mr.
Yes.
I could hear it coming out of my mouth, and I said I shouldn't continue to say it this way. So, Mr. Williamson, in any event, I apologize.
Between
This is-
Casablanca and Mr. Ed.
It's been a long day. Bear with me, people. So he's applying for a common vitular license. What a common vitular license is a license which is issued by the select board to establish establishments that cook, prepare, and serve food at tables. So any business in town who does that must have a common vitular license. That is something that gets renewed once a year. So he came and has applied for this. His company is the Nirvana Tea House and Cafe. And I would leave it to him to speak a little bit about what he's hoping for the business and the hours and such.
Sure. So we were, I started to open this before COVID-19 ever started, and so it wasn't a great time to start something like this, but we were halfway into it, so I figured we might as well go ahead and get it started and do the best we can. We're over here, we're right between Studio 109, the hairdresser, and Quality Cleaners. So we are going to be serving a full plant-based menu, and we have loose leaf teas from around the world. And it's great that we're going to be able to open up somewhat for some seating for outside and inside. We're planning to do that next week. We're hoping to open as soon as this weekend, if all goes well tonight. We have all of our approvals in place from the town with regards to inspections, and we have our final inspection from the fire chief and the building inspector. So all those things are in place, and we're ready to go.
And typically, for a common vitular license, this is the last stop along the way, as Ed said. They have to get all kinds of approvals and permits for other departments and such, and so typically the last stop here is with the board. They have to prove to us that they have their liability insurance in place and their workers' comp insurance, and so that's that. So if you have all of your other approvals, that's great.
Yep.
So let me ask a couple of questions. In terms of ultimately, how many do you hope to seat in the restaurant, so we can get a general sense?
Right now?
Well, not now. I mean, you can tell us.
Right now, not much. We hope to have about 30 max on the inside.
Okay.
Yes.
So at this point in time, it's going to be substantially less, but it would be an establishment that would be hopefully seating up to 30 patrons.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I know it's on the application, but maybe you could just explain to folks what the hours are going to be like and when you plan to be open for business.
Sure. We're not going to be open on Mondays. We're going to open from Tuesday through Sunday. So Tuesday through Thursday, we're open from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then on Saturday and Sunday for now, we're open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay, well, the application I have in front of me says Tuesday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. So,
Yeah, we're cutting back the hours for now
okay.
through this, yes.
So
Eventually, we'd like to go 11 to 9, Tuesday through Thursday. Saturday would be 8 to 8, I believe, 8 to 9.
yeah.
And then Sunday would be 8 to 8.
Oh, questions from my colleagues on the board?
I have a quick question. I think you mentioned it, but what kinds of food will you be serving? I understand a variety of teas, and what?
Sure. The teas we have are from around the world. They're from all over. They're loose leaf teas. We actually did a lot of research to find teas that come from environmentally friendly farms that protect animals, people, pay people well. So we did a lot of research for that. And then the food we have have some rice bowls, a couple of wraps, salads, and some treats, things like that. But all plant-based.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I make a comment, please?
Yes, certainly.
I just wanted to say that we were actually lucky enough to get a little sneak peek inside this past weekend, and it looks great in there. I think it's going to be a really neat place to go.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And Mr. Chair, I was going to ask through you, Ed, do you have a website or a place where people can go and view your menu or anything
Our
yet?
website should be launching by Friday.
Okay.
And it'll be nirvanateahousecafe.com.
Great.
A lot of work, and it's been a lot of work, and we're almost there.
Okay, other questions? Now, this license, if we grant it this evening, is going to be good through the end of the year.
Correct.
Will have to be renewed with the all the other licenses for 2020 for calendar 2021.
Exactly.
So this
Exactly.
basically today till the end of the year.
Yes, Karen made me aware of that.
Okay, good. Well, not wanting to hog all the glory here, I'm perfectly willing to hear a motion from my colleagues.
I could make a motion.
Okay, Ms. Underhill.
I move that we approve the common victualler license for Nirvana Tea House Cafe.
I'll second that.
Let's just say we'll approve it as of today, June.
Through the end of the year.
Yes.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded that we grant the common victualler license to Nirvana Tea House Cafe. I'll call a roll call of the board for the vote. Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Motion is carried unanimously. And we're excited to have another new business here in Millis and look forward to many visits with you before the end of the year and every year from here and after.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all
Yes.
visit, and I'm very happy to be here in Millis.
Thank you.
And Erin, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations to Mr. Ed.
All right, I mean, we're still early for our 7 o'clock hearing, which we really need to keep on. So I'm going to move to the next item on the agenda, which we will at least begin the conversation, and if we're not able to finish it by 7, then we will come back to it. But this is the review and approval of interdepartmental transfers. Every year at this time of year, frankly, there's some truing up going with respect to the budget, so that we can meet our obligations as we wind down to the end of the calendar or the fiscal year. And sometimes that involves moving money around among accounts so that we can meet all our obligations under the budget that we're operating under for FY20. But we can't move items among lines until it's approved by the board. So that's what tonight's request is from the finance director and the town administrator. So I would start, I guess, with you, Mr. Gazinski. Can you just go over what it is you're requesting the board's approval for with respect to these account transfers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you stated, interdepartmental transfers are allowed under state law during the months of May and June, with the concurrence of both the chief executive board, in this case the select board, and the finance committee.
Right.
Should the board approve these transfers tonight, we will be taking them to the finance committee meeting tomorrow night to ask for their approval as well. And in the board's packet are some documents in relation to these transfers. Just to go through these in summary fashion, and then if the finance director would like to add anything to that, I would encourage her to. The first item on the first page in your packet in regards to this is for general insurance. You see a requested transfer of $35,272. And this is mostly in regards to the addition of the Clyde Brown School to the insurance, as well as the insurance company every so often does a revaluation of our buildings to make sure they're charged the proper market value for the properties. They're doing this over a 3-year period, and the numbers did come in higher than we expected, but it is not a total shock, but 35,000 represents those higher premiums based on valuation of the town's insured properties. The next item is employee benefits at $13,942, and that's a result of our Medicare B reimbursements being unexpectedly high this year. And the last item is a public safety of $63,013, and that is related to overtime in the fire department, which the vast majority of which is the result of several of our officers in the department being out on extended sick leave and or 111F, and the costs required in overtime to fill those shifts. So those are the accounts that we're requesting funds in the general fund to be transferred into. And the source, the funding source we're seeking for that transfer is from debt service. And I will ask the finance director to talk about that a little bit. And I believe there's one other item having to do with sewer expenses, and that's related to overtime in the sewer department. And if you look further back in your documents, there is some more detailed breakdown of those different budget items. So, Carol, I don't know if you have anything to add on these items for the transfers?
No, the only thing is on the band pay down, that is for one of the outstanding bands for the Clyde Brown School, that the treasurer is going to permanently bond once they get a closeout on the project. So that will happen in FY21. So there will be expenses shifted to FY21 for this band. But that's why the money is available right now.
Yeah, BAN is a bond anticipation note, which is short-term borrowing in anticipation of long-term bonding of the project. So it is not uncommon in terms of short-term bonds turning out to be not quite as costly as we thought because of our ability to go to the market and buy the long-term bonds. So let me just ask, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then I'll ask my colleagues if they would like to question. In terms of the only item that is fairly large and therefore is somewhat concerning, I suppose, is the fire overtime. I know what the cause of it was, but the question is, based upon the budgeting that we did for fiscal 20, were these just a higher than normal set of injuries attributable to firefighters, and therefore creates a higher demand than typical?
Yeah, I would say that the fire chief's been working actively, and as you know, Mr. Chairman, we have worked with the fire union in an attempt to control the overtime costs as much as possible, and I think there's been a lot of progress in that. But having said that, we did have several officers out for an extended portion of the year that have caused this shortage, and these these incidents and the general trends of our fire overtime were taken into account when we looked at the budget for FY21 in the fire department. We believe that the budget for the fire department as put together for FY21 will be sufficient based on our understanding currently of the health and the status of the employees in the department going forward. Having said that, being an emergency department, it is hard to say, with certainty that the funds will be sufficient, but I think we are heading in the right direction in both the fire and the police department in regards to the overtime impacts.
And does any of this have any relationship to the work required for the COVID emergency?
No.
So,
No. The overtime associated with COVID is not included in any request here.
So this money, there's not a potential for some of this money being paid out of our application for COVID reimbursement.
Correct. The overtime here is a result of officers being out on either on 111F or sick leave for reasons other than COVID.
Okay. Other questions from my colleagues?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Germain?
You asked pretty much what I was concerned with is the amount of overtime. Do we not have offsets, say in the EMT area and so forth, that help with this?
so when we did the analysis in order to see where the deficits were, we already took those, any of those other opportunities into account before coming forward with the request for the $63,000. That's the balance of what's left after we've already done our adjustments.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Underhill?
could I please ask what 111F is?
I was going to ask the same thing, so
Thank you.
I apologize. Sometimes I forget how long I've been talking about these terms and realize it is a foreign language for most. The 111F is a section in statute within state law that guarantees payment for police officers and firefighters injured in the line of duty. And there are certain requirements up bounds in connection with it's basically the public safety equivalent of workers' compensation. But the rules are slightly different and the benefits are slightly different. I would say the benefits are slightly more generous and liberal in the 111F because of the nature of the work. So basically it's a workers' comp situation.
Thank you.
You also hear it as IOD, Erin, which is injured on duty.
Okay.
That's how it's often referred to as well.
okay, in terms of the, I'm mindful of the time, in terms of, the only other item is an enterprise request. I know it's small, but I would prefer that we go ahead and make our decision with respect to the general fund transfers, and then we'll postpone the conversation on the sewer fund until the scheduled hearing is over. So in order to facilitate this, I guess, and by the way, for the director, under the header approvals, we are the select board.
We will fix that.
I'm going to fix your spreadsheet.
Okay.
Okay, so I would make the motion that the board approve the transfer of $112,227 from line 7,000 debt service to the following accounts: 1,300 general insurance, $35,272. 1,400 employee benefits, $13,942, and 2,000 line item 2,000 public safety in the amount of $63,000 $13.
I'll second that.
So it's been moved and seconded that the board approve these interfund transfers from the debt service line to the lines indicated in the motion. So I'll poll the board. Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. So the motion is carried. And again, we will come back to, I believe that the one on the enterprise is a separate item, right? You're asking for a separate number there. It's not part of the general fund transfer.
Correct, that would be a separate vote because it's all within the sewer enterprise.
Okay. All right, well, we will come back to that, so we'll end it until after we've had our discussion with the hearing on the cable license. So, is Mr. Solomon available? And Mr. Harrington, are you available? Are you on the call?
I see them listed.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get unmuted. John Harrington's there.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Solomon.
Let me unmute Bill.
Well, we'll assume he's here. Because I do want to
Oh,
open
there
the
he
hearing.
is. Bill?
So for purposes of this discussion, this is a public hearing related to the renewal of the cable television license for Verizon New England Incorporated. The hearing is really a requirement that we hold a hearing with respect to any license renewal that is recommended. It's under the rules of the Massachusetts Division. Public notice was posted appropriately, and we are...
Oh, yeah, I'm there. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you, and we can hear you, I think. So I'm at the point now where, I guess technically, you can advise me, do we have to formally open the hearing by vote of the board?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion that the board open the hearing regarding the renewal of the cable television license of Verizon New England Inc. So I'll poll the board for opening the hearing. Ms. Underhill,
Yes.
Mr. Germain,
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. So I'll formally open the hearing for the license renewal. The process here will be, we will allow comments, or if we will actually solicit comments from representing the Millis Cable, also then counsel representing Verizon New England, and then we will ask the board members if they have questions about the license renewal, and then we will open up to any public comments that may be, that the public may want to make with respect to the license renewal itself. So that's the process we'll follow for this hearing. At the end of the hearing, we will make a decision as a board, either to approve the license or to delay the approval if anything comes up that would be required further work. So the outcome here hopefully will be a license approval, but let's go through the process. I'd like to start then by asking counsel that represented Millis Media and the town, Mr. William Solomon, to brief us on what are the critical items, critical elements of this license renewal. So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. First, I just wanted to thank the chair. It was sitting on the cable committee, and Mike and the rest of the committee members. It was outstanding negotiation that's led to a good license on both parts. And I'd like to also thank John Harrington, counsel for Verizon, who was a great negotiator in terms of protecting his client's interests, but understanding some of the unique interests of the town. So thank you. So in summary, it's a 5-year license. Our Comcast license is a 10-year license. Verizon has a shorter time span in terms of how long they may or may not be in cable. So it's a 5-year license. It also has an out provision that I do not anticipate ever being exercised by Verizon, and I'll ask at the end Attorney Harrington to make a comment on it. That out provision says that after 27 months Verizon could give the town 6 months' notice and give up its cable license and therefore not provide cable service in the town. I said I don't think that'll be exercised, but because Verizon wants to keep its options open, and because it's difficult to tell a party they have to provide a service when it's their business, we reached an agreement that was consistent with some recent agreements, which provided the no less than 27-month time period, together with a 6-month notice. In addition to that, in funding of cable licenses, as you may know, there's PEG, Public Educational and Government Access Operating Support, what it costs to run community television in Millis for the nonprofit. And there's also capital funding. The operating funding has increased from 4.5% of the company's gross revenues to 5%. That's a 0.5% increase minus $1.30 per subscriber per year of license fees. So that's a material increase. It also reflects the same increase that the town was able to achieve in the Comcast license. With respect to the capital dollars, as in the back and forth with respect to the term of the license, what was agreed to is that the capital dollars would be paid not over 5 years, as was originally the intent if it was a 5-year license, but would be paid over 3 years, so that all the capital would be paid before at the time that Verizon could, if it so chose, exit cable TV in Millis. In addition to that capital dollar amount, which is $59,000, $57,000, I apologize, $19,000 for each of the first 3 years to be paid 60 days after the license is signed for the first payment. That's a set dollar amount. Before we agreed upon the potential out, I said, which I don't think will be exercised, the capital dollars would be paid as a percentage of gross revenue and a smaller set dollar amount. By getting a set dollar amount, we're not subject to the fluctuations of subscribers or revenues, but rather have a set amount that Millis will have for Millis TV that they can depend on. In addition to that, there continues to be PEG access video return. How do you get the PEG access from some of the remote buildings, the high school, the elementary school, to the town hall and picked up at the town hall by Verizon? Verizon will continue to pick up the signal at the studio hub site at the town hall. And for up until September of 2021, they will continue, 20 rather, this year, September 30th of 2020, they'll continue to take the signal from the high school, junior high school combination to the town hall. After that, they'll be released, or even potentially sooner if the town gets them notice, they'll be released because the town, as you know, is going to be building its own municipal fiber system so that the town doesn't require Verizon to return that signal. Part of the deal on the PEG capital of $57,000 was taking into consideration the fact that that Verizon will no longer have that responsibility. Final 2 points in the license, which is new. There's an HD channel. I don't have it on the list, but in addition to your 3 PEG channels, public education and government, which are standard definition, in fact, they're even better than standard definition in the Verizon system, they'll be providing a high definition channel that was in the longer summary as soon as the town gets notice to them and with a passage of 270 days after that notice. As you may know, high definition is important because if every other show program looks different, looks better, it's more difficult to people to want to stop on certain PEG access channels. That'll be one channel. The town can use it for the P, the E, or the G, or you can use it to make a totally new channel that's a combination of those. That'll be up to the Access Corporation and their recommendation and the Board of Selectmen's final determination. So that's a plus. In addition, there's 2 other provisions. One is that there's, with respect to the electronic program guide, as you may know, that Verizon or a cable company now have electronic program guides. It says what the programming is for the next week or so. You can set your DVR to record that programming. That is not now available for PEG access. The provision there provides that if Verizon provides EPG, Electronic Program Guide, to any other community in Massachusetts, other than on a trial basis, they have to come to Millis and discuss the question of providing it in Millis. The same thing for PEG access, video on demand, slightly less important in the modern day. As you know, Millis TV has video on demand on the internet, but this would be video on demand on the cable system. Same provision. If they provide it to any other community, and there's some large communities out there that that would potentially negotiate this, then they have to come to Millis and discuss providing it here. My sense is that if Verizon does provide that in another community other than test basis, that they'll be ready to provide it. And not every license has this provision, so that's a plus for the town. And finally, with respect to some of the legalese and the protections of the town, it's the most protective license in the Commonwealth for a few reasons. It deals with the issue of bundling in a way that is fair to both parties but protects the town. Bundling is when you provide all 2 or 3 services together, internet, telephone, cable. The question is how much of the revenue is cable, because your 5% is only on the cable revenue. The franchise fee does not apply to internet or telephone. This provision provides that it'll be in accordance with GAAP accounting, and in addition, nothing stops Verizon from providing further funding. It doesn't provide that whatever Verizon decides is the cable portion counts. That wouldn't be reasonable. That's not how they do business. So we appreciate that. And then secondly, with respect to the potential of comparing this license to someone else who might use the right-of-way in the future, that comparison is for a cable license. If someone else if the town were to give a cable license or cable franchise to another party, and we're already done with Comcast, or a similar agreement. So that provision where, in theory, Verizon would have some rights to say, well, someone else was treated better, compares them to like entities and services and not to unlike services, which is a large protection for the town. So all in all, it's a very protected license legally, and with respect to policy, the town's insurance indemnification rights, and most importantly for the town, it's now taken one further step forward in getting increased funding, both operating and capital, for what's a outstanding PEG access program that I got to know working in the town over the last 2+ years. Worked a great job by the folks who run it, and you'll be able to build that going forward and expand it at a time, final point, that we now know how essential it is. And COVID-19 tells us who's essential and who's not. Well, the access folks are there. They're doing even more programming. They're helping the town with Zoom. So I think people now realize even more so how essential community television is to a community, and particularly in a community like Millis that has such an excellent program. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I'll ask Mr. Harrington if he'd like to address the board, and then we will shift to board questions, and then we'll go to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Harrington from the firm Kirby Harrington Pinkert. We represent Verizon New England, and I would like to echo Mr. Solomon's comments about the negotiation. It was fair, and at times it was vigorous, but I think it reflects a good deal for both parties. The provisions that are in there to protect Verizon do not reflect any anticipation that they will be canceling the franchise. It's more to as a prudent business practice and this uncertain area of technology and regulations. So we've been imposing these conditions in the renewals for at least a year now, and it's reflective of the agreements that we have been negotiating over the last several months. My feeling.
I like the term requested as opposed to imposed.
Yes, requested.
And we agree to it.
No. You're absolutely right. But there was ambivalence on the company's part when they were determining whether they were going to continue in the cable business. And it was, they needed these protections to make sure. I think it's not beyond anyone to know the influx of streaming services have been cutting in on subscribers. And Verizon overpaid to get into the business. That was their own decision. But there's an analogy to be made with cable TV to the landline telephone. So all they're looking for is some prudent protections within these renewals. The anticipation is we're going to complete this contract.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo the comments made by council. I was part of the negotiating team, and I think that we've reached a point where 2 years ago we were looking at renewals for both of our cable providers, and if we move forward with this one, we will have secured contracts and license renewals with both cable providers, providing to the citizens of Millis and potential subscribers with some stability in terms of what they're offering. We also were able to get some additional funding for the programs, as Mr. Solomon indicated. So I think that the negotiating team was satisfied with the outcome and happy to rate this recommendation to the board for renewal of the license on this terms. With that, I would like to ask if my colleagues have questions on the renewal contract or any items that were discussed.
No, I thought that the explanation was actually quite good and pretty clear.
Thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
No questions here. Thank you.
Okay, I would ask, again, it's sometimes difficult to know who's on the line, but I want to give the opportunity to anybody who may be on this conference from the public, if they have some comments or questions or they would like to bring forward, if they could raise their hand and ask for recognition. Okay, I'm not hearing any. So with that being the case, I think I would like to then close this hearing so that the board can move to making a decision on the license renewal. So I make a motion that the hearing, that we adjourn the hearing for the cable license for Verizon New England.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the hearing. I will poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
So the hearing is closed, and now we will discuss as a board the renewal of the license, and then take a motion to do that. I think the most efficient way to do it is to make the motion and then poll the board to see if there's any comments with respect to the motion.
We have a proposed motion here already.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. I could do that.
Very good.
I'll take that one. I hereby move that the select board, as cable television license issuing authority, vote as follows: to grant the subject cable television renewal license with an effective date of July 1st, 2020 to Verizon New England Incorporated, said renewal license to be effect subject to and upon its execution by Verizon.
Second.
So it has
Mr. Chairman,
the comments.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, just one comment, if I might. The very final approval in Verizon is being awaited by Attorney Harrington. He and I expect no issue with that. However, I just wanted to mention that they're still waiting for that. Hopefully it'll be tomorrow. So the approval and signing by the board, and I'll sign it too, it does not make it an official license until it's also signed by Verizon. The license provides they can sign a separate signature sheet that's come about during the COVID period. So I have no question it will be finally approved by Verizon, but the very final official approval we still await him. And John, I believe he expects that probably sort of this week, most likely.
Yeah, I can confirm that. I got this is a procedure where the subject matter experts sign off on the final agreement, which has already happened. Then it goes before a board of people to get their final signature. The finances were approved finally today, and that was the last issue that will now go before the full board. I have no doubt that it will be approved shortly, and I'll get right back to Bill.
Okay, that's good. I mean, the motion does, it's subject to their execution. I'm glad we have that clarification from Mr. Solomon.
Right.
So is there any further discussion by the board members with respect to the motion?
Not from myself.
Well, then I will poll the board, poll the board to vote yes or no. Mr. McCaffrey, I vote yes. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
The motion is carried unanimously. And I want to take this opportunity to thank both Mr. Solomon and Mr. Harrington for their hard work in getting us to this point, as well as the negotiating committee, which had spent a lot of time and effort on this, including the town administrator, Madeline Usna, Rainer Mandan, and myself as the primary members of the negotiating committee. So I think, again, once we get the final sign on the dotted line, if you will, from Verizon, we will have our license in place. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mike, for your help. Thank you, John.
Yep.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Just to circle back to finish up the inter-fund transfer, we have one additional item there, which is an inter-fund transfer with respect to the enterprise, the sewer enterprise. And I guess that this is a small, relatively small amount. It doesn't affect any account other than the enterprise, but I would like to get Mr. Kaczynski to explain to us what this is, why we're having this interfund transfer proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you had mentioned, this is simply a transfer from sewer enterprise expenses to sewer enterprise salaries and for overtime in the amount of $3,009. And since the Director McKay is on the line, I'll let him give the details of that and answer any questions the board might have in regards to that transfer.
Yes, Mr. McKay.
Thank you. So these funds were, if you remember, we were in contract negotiations. Both the water and sewer funds, we never allocated anything from town meeting. And with the signing of the contracts, these funds will be needed for that to pay for the salaries line item.
This is for the contract year, fiscal year of 2020.
2020, correct.
It enables us to finish off the collective bargaining agreement and to fund the account.
Correct.
So it's a moving from expenses to salaries within the sewer department, if you will. Any questions from the members of the board?
No.
So then we need a motion to authorize, I guess I'll make the motion, to authorize the transfer from line item. There's a lot more numbers in these line items than there was on the other one. But it's line item 600051, sewer expenses of $3,009 into account 600051 sewer enterprise salaries in the same amount for overtime.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? All right, I'll poll the board. All those in favor of authorizing the interfund transfer will indicate by saying aye. Mr. McCaffrey, aye. Mr. Germain?
Aye.
Ms. Underhill?
Aye.
All right, the motion is carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda for this evening, it's just about right on time. It is a conversation regarding the grant request for a remediation project for the water system. For those following the agenda, it's above the existing, above the items we're working through now, but is a scheduled item, and is Mr. McKay can address it as Kleinfelder.
Yes.
Is there
Thank you, Mr.
anything that you want me to
Chairman.
show? Sorry, Jim. Is there anything you want to show on the screen, or no, just discussion?
Just a quick discussion and then
Okay.
Kirsten slides if we could. Did she have any?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Okay, so Christian, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You can share yours when you're ready.
Okay, so I'll just be quick, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I know you know Kirsten. For the other board members, Kirsten represented us when we were doing the sale of water to Midway, and we felt her expertise in Millis could assist us in our PFAS problem that we've been ongoing for the past several months. We finally finished the second round of testing, and we found that the PFAS is in all 5 of our wells. Higher levels in 3 of them, wells 3 and 5 are well below the level. And Kirsten's going to get into much more of that discussion as we go on. The transfer station, just a quick, we've been working with the people at DEP, and things are also on good footing with that. There may be some modifications that we have to do. Luckily, at this point, they have not touched the old landfill. They feel that was capped, and right now they're going to leave that alone, which is good news for all of us. But there is some other testing that we will have to do at the capped landfill, which you all know that's the newer of the 2. So that's still an ongoing thing. We're not going to address that as part of this discussion tonight. But so I'll turn it over to Kirsten, and Betsy's here also from Kleinfelder, who knows a ton of water stuff. So Kirsten, go ahead.
Karen, when I click share screen, it says host is disabled, participant screen sharing.
Oh. Here we go. Open, sorry, bear with me.
Yep.
There we go. Try now.
Okay.
Did it work?
Just pick the correct one.
Sorry, making it difficult for you.
No, it's okay. 1 second.
The wonders of Zoom.
Yeah, now bear with me 1 moment. There it is. Slideshow. I'm beginning. Okay, so everybody can see this?
No.
No. Might give it a second.
Let me make sure it's saying advanced sharing options. Do you have to hit?
Work easier for you, Kirsten, to possibly send it to Karen so she could display it?
I don't know why it's not showing. My apologies. It looks like you can. Did it ask you if you could?
Yep.
There we go.
Okay, now it's working. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Okay, great, thanks. So, yeah, thank you, Jim, for that introduction, and it's good to see some familiar faces. I remember Jim McCaffrey from back then. And so, as Jim mentioned, you know, you guys have been dealing with this challenge of this emerging contaminant, PFAS, particularly relating to the drinking water supplies. You guys are not really alone. There's probably more than a dozen communities in Massachusetts in a similar situation, and probably that will increase as time goes on. But we wanted to definitely get in front of you because there's a brand new and sort of fast-tracked significant grant funding opportunity that could help you to address the first step in tackling this issue with your water supply. Just a few things I wanted to cover and give a quick update. Jim already kind of touched on a little bit the landfill, but I want to highlight the recent results of the drinking water well testing, talk about this grant program, sort of what it is, what we propose that you do to take advantage of it, and, you know, benefits versus risks of going forward, and next steps. So just in case anyone's listening is not really familiar with what the heck is happening.
Kirsten, can I interrupt briefly?
Yeah.
You're not actually in full presentation mode, and your slides aren't advancing.
It's like stuck on the first slide, Kristen.
about now? Are you seeing the full present? You're not seeing the full presentation
I
mode?
think if you just hit slideshow up at the top, I don't know why it's being funny.
Actually, I think it's because I have too many screens and I've got things happening on different screens.
Well, we moved to the agenda slide. That's step one.
Yeah. You can see
Yeah.
it, but it's as
Okay,
if it's
you
not
see that,
actually in
but-
the slideshow
yeah.
yet. It's in the kind of prep phase here.
Yeah. Okay, I have that over here. How do I change that? I think I just need to share a different screen. I'm really lost here.
Sorry.
To not hold
Yeah.
the board up too much, we can offer this in the version that we have it now, but it won't be in the full presentation mode. Just
You're seeing,
Yeah.
you're not seeing it full presentation mode
Yeah.
right now.
Right.
No. We could see you going from.
we're seeing the notes page. That's fine. You know, if we.
Yeah, we can see you going from slide to slide. It's just not right. It's just not the whole thing. Oh, there you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I think I've just had it on the wrong screen. Too many screens.
That is
Okay.
better.
Okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Great. Sorry about that. All right. So just a little, 2-minute primer here on what this is all about for anybody listening that isn't aware. This is PFAS is a type of human-made substances used in manufacturing industrial consumer products. And they're very long-lived, so they can build up in the environment and in the human body, and they've been linked to some developmental and other health effects. So this is why a lot of states, EPA is moving forward very slowly to regulate, and states are moving faster to regulate these compounds. So the current situation in Massachusetts in terms of regulations and guidelines has been pretty rapidly evolving, and also in New England in general. But earlier this year, Mass DEP set a new health guideline of 20 parts per trillion. It was 70 previously, and it's 20 parts per trillion for the sum of 6 PFAS compounds. And then also earlier this year, the Bureau of Site Cleanup set a standard for 20 parts per trillion for certain groundwater categories. So the guideline is expected to become a statutory regulation, or what they call an MCL, maximum contaminant limit in drinking water, of 20 during this year. There's a lot of pressure on DEP to set this and finalize it. So they don't seem to show any signs of slowing down.
Can you just, before you go on,
Yeah.
go back to that little graphic in the lower right-hand corner?
Yeah, so this is a
People
graphic.
some sense of what this is.
Sure. Yeah, parts per trillion is a very, very tiny amount. A lot of other contaminants are regulated an order of magnitude larger amount, parts per million. And 1 part per trillion, just if you are trying to visualize what that means, it's essentially equivalent to a drop of water in 20 large Olympic-sized swimming pools. So it's a very tiny amount.
Excuse me, may I ask a question? How did
Yes.
they arrive at that? Is it a linear progression, or is it some other regression analysis that they did?
Well, I'm not a toxicologist, so, but they set these levels, the state toxicologists will set these levels based on reviewing a large number of, studies. They're mostly laboratory studies involving, rodent studies. And then they set various factors, like safety factors, to account for, really, it's all about protecting the most vulnerable people in the population drinking water, which in this case would be pregnant women, nursing women, and infants. So as far as how they exactly arrive at it, that would take a whole other lengthy presentation to get to that
Well, the reason I ask is if it's linear, it doesn't mean anything. If it's nonlinear, it's come up with an algorithmic progression process, it does mean something. But everything I've read, and just so you're aware, I have now talked with our representatives. They're investigating because nobody knows quite how they arrived at this, and nobody can give me an answer. I'm hoping you can, because if we're being asked to deal with it, it would be nice to know how they arrived at it.
Yeah, well, they have published, they haven't published any response to comments yet on the proposed regulation, which has been, the draft regulation has been put out for public comment. I haven't seen any responses to comments. I believe they have documentation of how they arrived at it, but it's not something I'm, intimately familiar with. I just know that this is where they're heading, so, I'm trying to get people ready for it. But some other states have also gone through similar process.
Yeah, but nobody I've talked with knows how they determined that number, other than it looks like they used much larger numbers and then extrapolated through linear regressions, which doesn't mean anything with those low numbers, but nobody can answer that question, or at least nobody seems to be willing to answer it.
I could look into it further. I'm not sure what type of statistics or regression they're using, but
I think it would be useful because I am trying to pass information on to some of our reps who are very interested in this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's basically the concept that, yes, we are good stewards of our environment. Yes, we are good stewards of stormwater runoff and water quality, et cetera, et cetera. But we also feel, the ongoing unfunded mandate requirements that we want to be able to convince ourselves and to tell our constituents, our citizens, that what we're doing is spending money to remediate things that are really a problem, as opposed to just following the requirements of some arbitrary guideline. Now, I realize that you have to pick not only the science, but the forum to make it effective. And I'm certainly not advocating that we don't comply if that's what the regulation becomes. And we better know what we're in for, I think, is really the point of this.
mm-hmm.
But, there is some, and we're not alone, some frustration that things come down the pike and we seem to have the limited ability to affect the outcome. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's something I'm used to hearing.
All right, why don't we continue?
Okay. I believe, one of the administrators from DEP had expressed a willingness to, talk at length on the subject, Mr. Jermaine, that you were raising. So I don't know if those discussions have gone any further, but, that's something we can revisit with them.
That would be great. I haven't heard anything. Thank you.
So if I can just, they will come out, they will hold public hearings. They'd be more than happy to come out and hold any type of public hearing for public, for the board. They're willing to do that.
Yeah, that would give you the ability to directly question their toxicologists to develop the numbers, to get some good answers, rather than my interpretation or out of my field of expertise. Okay, gonna move on?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jim already kind of touched on this with the landfill issue, and there's some good coordination happening with the landfill folks and DEP with Jim and folks. So some parts of that have been resolved in terms of regulatory reporting, and then the other arm of DEP, waste site cleanup, is they are actually proactively looking into potential PFAS sources in the watershed, different possible potentially responsible parties that might be contributing to the situation. So we don't have a resolution on where the sources are. There's probably multiple. There's a number of sites in the watershed that might be contributing to the issue. The drinking water well testing results, there have been a couple of rounds of data here, and just kind of highlighting in red the one result from well 2 that was exceeding the proposed 20 parts per trillion standard. So wells 1 and 2 get blended together at the Angelus water treatment facility, and that goes into the distribution there as a blend. So also on here is the data for the Angelus blended source. So you can see it's below 20, but it's pretty close. So the things highlighted in orange are wells where it's in the neighborhood of 20. Well 1, well 2, well 3 are the 3 ones that have some level of concern, being about anywhere from 75 to 100% of that proposed standard. Well 4 and 5 are considerably lower. Well 4 is testing around 8 parts per trillion, and well 5 around 5. Well 6 is offline for service, so we haven't been able to test that yet.
Can I just interrupt for a moment and ask McKay if he could, just for those who may be listening, make sure that everybody in the public knows where these wells are. When you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where are they?
Sure. So wells 1 and 2, they're at the DPW facility. When you go to the transfer station, if you look over to the left, that's the treatment facility that's right up on the hill there. Both wells 1 and 2 are further down into the woods, leading towards the old landfill. That's where the wells 1 and 2 are. Well 3 is off of Birch Street, off the village. It's into the woods, well into the woods. Well 4 is up at South End Pond, right in the pond, that building that's right there. And wells 5 and 6, you can see the treatment facility, that nice looking building that's on Norfolk Road. That's right beside the farm there, not the sewer station that's on Village and Norfolk Road. It's the other, that's the treatment facility. And both wells 5 and 6 are well into the, I'd say a mile into the woods, 3/4 of a mile, right close to the Charles River.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So just to summarize, as I said, 3 of those 6 supply wells are fairly close to that limit of 20 parts per trillion that's being proposed. The source of the contamination is unknown, probably multiple sources. There's also the potential for, running a supply deficit with both wells 1 and 2 offline if they need to be taken offline. Some relief could be had by different operation of wells 5 and 6. The DEP is open to providing some of the pumping relief over there. Again, we don't know what well 6 levels are, if anything. But just in some of the pumping records from prior years, if 1 and 2 were offline, there's potential for a supply deficit, especially if we had another well out of service like we have right now. When the regulation gets promulgated beginning in 2021, Millis will need to test, so any wells that are have tested above 10 parts per trillion, the draft regulation right now says you have to test those monthly just to keep making sure they're not bumping up over the 20. Right now, DEP has been paying for the sampling that's being done proactively, but once the regulation's promulgated, I don't know that will continue. So, and the samples are about $300 each, and you have to test and then confirm the test. So it's a significant amount of money that would be incurred for just simply testing monthly. If anything is off over 20, obviously once this is a regulation, you have to immediately take that offline, and then it's a violation of your drinking water regulations. You have to mail public notices and continue to do so until the problem's resolved. So, treatment systems are pretty straightforward for this contaminant. It's generally big old carbon filter, granular activated carbon. But they can cost, upwards of several $1 million for each facility, depending on site-specific factors.
May I ask one quick question? What about people with private wells? Should they be testing for this? Is this a concern to them?
Well, possibly. It also, PFAS can also be present in wastewater, septic system, effluent at elevated levels. It's not a bad idea.
But mitigation then becomes a pretty substantial issue.
Well, for a small well, that's running not a very large pumping rate, you can use carbon filters, you can use a reverse osmosis system for a house. There's a number of different options. Like a point of use filter versus a whole house filter, then you're talking more expensive for a whole house system.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the grant program, so this was something that was just announced in, I think, the end of May, and it's due July 10th. But it's pretty fast decision process they're talking about, and it's a very streamlined application. So they can say they're going to announce awards in August, and the work would have to be done within the fiscal year, but they are providing up to $200,000 per applicant to fund planning and engineering design of PFAS treatment. There's not a lot of requirements attached to this. They encourage a match, but you're not required to provide a match of dollars or labor either. You're familiar with many of the other grant programs where that's a big component. There's really no other requirements besides submitting the application, and then if you're awarded it, submitting your cost for reimbursement. So what we would suggest this be pursued for is to focus on wells 1 and 2, since combined, those are a larger supply than 3, or maybe about the same size, but then you would be treating 2 sources, you preserve some resiliency there. You would evaluate the existing facilities. If you're familiar with the Angelus treatment system right now, it's in a little bit of a tight spot. It's got some sloping topography, so you'd need to really see what the site constraints are there. You'd be envisioning in the future treatment would look like a couple of 10 to 12 foot diameter, 20 feet tall, carbon filters that would need a building addition to house them for the winter. And then you need a backwashing system for that. So evaluating, your site constraints, and then preparing a conceptual design. What would the sizing of the equipment be, building addition layout, access, tank size, location, and then DEPs are going to require pilot testing of the system. So the outcome of this would be you'd know what your capital and O&M costs and schedule are to a sufficient level of certainty, for budgeting and planning purposes. And you'd have a partway advanced design to then carry forward. Trying to weigh the decision on this, not moving ahead at all, you might find yourself in a reactive mode. The wells may continue to stay below 20, but as I said, you're fairly soon going to need to be testing very frequently, and then having a risk of running out of supply. I don't know if they're going to offer this going forward. As I said, it's a new program. Hopefully they're going to expand it. But, I see many benefits for moving ahead proactively. Your unknowns will be defined. Like I said, it's a pretty streamlined, and really, I don't see any strings attached in this grant. There's nothing in it that obligates you to actually proceed with implementing the design. So you know. So this would help you comply with an expected new regulation. there any questions so far?
No, go ahead. I mean, we
Okay.
have more questions, but let's finish up the, this is really about whether or not we apply for the grant.
Yeah, exactly. So the next steps in this would just be, a decision tonight, one way or the other, whether, the Public Works is authorized to submit an application that's due on July 10th. We started a preliminary draft just to discuss with Jim and Mike, and then award notifications are supposed to be end of July, contract start mid-August, and then, it's plenty of time to complete the work by the spring, and the June 30th deadline under the grant. So,
That's June 30th of 21.
yes.
Okay.
And that's all I have. Questions? Happy to answer.
It says slide 12 of 17. Under
The other ones I just have are some other
the other side.
just graphics, reference slides.
Never mind if you don't want to.
No, seriously, it's sometimes I keep tables or graphics from other documents that in case someone asks a question, I can look that up.
Okay. I would ask that, we want to make sure that everything's available to not only the board members, but the public, so.
Sure. Yeah. Email
Okay,
it
so
to you.
let me just comment. I mean, we discussed a little bit in our questioning the standard itself, and we don't need to determine right now what we might want to do, although we want to talk about it a little bit in terms of challenging the standard. I mean, we're not the only ones, I'm sure. But what this is recommending is we can get a grant which may very well cover 100% of the cost of a mitigation, assuming that the standard holds, assuming that we have to comply with it based upon the testing, then this will give us a way of thinking about a mitigation project, if you will, which is basically filtration of some sort, right?
Yeah. It's not going to cover 100% of the solution, but
No, but at least it gives us something
yeah,
to get our arms around. So
exactly.
that point of view, I mean, I agree with your slide, which says there's not much to lose by getting the grant. I'm not sure that this board wants to simply do that. We may want to do some other things in terms of our questioning about the standard itself. Don't want to go off on the Don Quixote journey here, but at some point we may well want to have the DEP come out and talk to us about this, so that not only the board members but our constituents and our water system customers understand what's at stake here. So with that said, I will ask my colleagues if they have comments and questions that they'd like to like to address.
Just a quick question, if I may. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. What is the cost of preparing the grant going to be? I assume that we're assuming we're going to get a grant. Assuming we get that grant, then perhaps your cost would be rolled into that. But if we don't, what is the cost to prepare the grant?
We're absorbing the cost. My builder's absorbing the cost for the grant application. Like I said, it's pretty streamlined, so we're not concerned about
That's
that.
fine. I'm just trying to understand it.
No, yep, appreciate it.
There are many other questions, but they will sidetrack us. But I think it was clear enough in what you just said. Thank you.
Understand.
Erin, would you like some questions?
I think so. Yes, please. So I hate to make you regurgitate anything here, but it's not a final decision that it's a 20-point part per trillion yet. When is that decision expected to be made?
I believe that it is. It is a final. The last per trillion is 20. It's when they no.
Well, it's a draft regulation.
Yeah.
It's not been promulgated yet.
Okay.
Right, but that's what I was going to say, that it's still in the draft form, but that number 20, I can't see it being changed.
Mm-hmm.
going from 20 to 30.
Yeah.
And you said it used to be 70?
No, I said it's not going to go up there. Yeah.
Yeah, the prior guideline was 70. For 70 for the sum of 2 compounds, and now it's 20 for the sum of 6 compounds.
Okay.
Actually, in New Hampshire, a community challenged New Hampshire regulations, and it appears that they lost because they just promulgated again the lower standards that they had sought originally.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my personal opinion, I feel like I probably just don't know enough about the entire topic. If it's a no-risk situation to, if we get a grant, then understand what the costs associated with dealing with the issue would be, so we could at least be prepared and know what we'd be looking at if everything does fall into line the way it's predicted in the drafts. If it's something we have to do, then it would probably be good to understand sooner rather than later what that will mean. It's just my opinion.
So as part of this process, myself, the town administrator, and Betsy and Kirsten have discussed this thoroughly. We are coming up with a pamphlet that will be disseminated, well, through you first, through the board, through the commissioners, before we send it out to the public. We've got to educate the public on this, because once it hits, every once in a while the Globe will come up with a story on this subject, and they have a lot to say about it. And it's best that we get out in front of this before, 17 to 20, I mean, that's very close. Kirsten and Betsy are working on the pamphlet or the fact sheet right now that we will have for you probably at your next meeting in July. The reason for this, I don't believe you're meeting till after July 10th, and the deadline for this was, so that's why Mike thought it would be best that we get this approved at tonight's meeting.
So I totally misunderstood the numbers. So it was 17, not 70.
So our numbers are 17. Right
I
the
see.
blend at Wells 1 and 2 is 17.
Yes.
And that's what's actually getting out into the distribution system. And at Well 3, it's 17 or almost 18. It's pretty close to the same.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3 of our 6 producing wells. We have 1 well that's down for our repairs. And actually, well number 5 will probably be coming offline very shortly due to the drought that we're experiencing right now. Because the river levels at the Charles are dropping, and we'll probably have to take that offline because that's part of our permit. If we have to turn off wells 1 and 2, they've given us the grace in past to leave wells 5 and 6 on, which is a great help. But right now, well 6 is in need of repair, and we haven't fixed that yet because of it's going to be after July 1st. The funding we can use out of the budget to fix well 6.
Well, my perspective also, having us pursue this grant and learn more about what our options are is probably prudent. There's I don't see any real downside from the town's point of view. There's a different question about the standard itself.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you address that? And I think that there was an indication that, you might find that this town and some others trying to work with legislators to see if there's a solution to this problem. Certainly, if the regulation is still proposed, I don't know if there's any additional comment period that is available so that, we would want to comment on the regulation because, the way they work is they get issued in draft form, people get a chance to comment, they go back and look at it again, and then they finalize the regulation. So I don't know exactly where that stands. It seems to be that they're not quite final, but is that right or not?
That's right. They had a public comment period, which closed in.
So the public comment period is over.
Yes, it is.
So they're taking the public comments, all of which I'm sure were, raising at least some of the issues that we've discussed. May see some change, or we may not. I mean, the best guess is that they're going to come out and stay with that standard.
That's my best guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but frankly, depending on the stakes, this could be litigated. I mean, I'm not sure that Millis wants to go alone against the state DEP, bear the cost of litigation, challenging that this is an arbitrary standard. But if we're going to talk about what our solutions or what our remedies might be, we should consider all of them and determine whether it's a cost-effective solution. And I don't think anybody on this board is interested in doing anything other than protecting the public health of the citizens of Millis. The question is whether this 20 number is a meaningful protection.
Yeah, Mr. McCaffrey, to that point.
Before we do that, Betsy, I certainly would like us to have included in our conversation the Millis Board of Health, because I think they have perspective as well. So, go ahead.
They've been in on it. Kathy Landon's been in through this whole process.
Yeah.
Yes, and just to your comment with respect to the issue of litigation, I was going to remark, just as you did, that going it alone probably is not going to be necessarily very fruitful. We did see that there was some value in things like the coalition of watershed stewards and your appeal of the MS4. There were some minor wins associated with that group effort. I would agree that maybe keeping an eye out for those opportunities to join in this kind of effort. But I think Kirsten would also mention that there's a very strong coalition, as there almost always is, on the other side of this question as well, like the Conservation Law Foundation and others who are going to take the opposite approach. So I think it would be a complicated situation to go alone. I know that Mr. Germain was involved in a conversation that we had with Mary G. Pigsley, the regional director, with respect to the question on the merits of that threshold at 20 parts per trillion. And I think, DEP is being pretty proactive or even aggressive, one might say, with respect to sort of pushing forward on this. I think it's a great idea to try to continue the dialogue with them, one, because I think that it gives us a better sense as to how far they, might be pushing the elements of enforcement. But it also, I think, offers some opportunity for the community to, have a productive dialogue with them about solutions. And, they're not always just the enforcer. There are some elements here, and this grant being one of them, of an effort to try to find a solution as well. And I think working both parallel tracks with respect to, is there a way to make sure that this is in fact a necessary option, and also keeping the door open to further dialogue with DEP, and that's certainly what we recommend.
Well, now that you mention it, you're correct. I am concerned. I happen to agree that PFAS is something to be concerned with. The problem we have is understanding how it was arrived at. And no one, DEP or otherwise, has been able to give us that information. So it's important that we understand it first, so the people understand where the real risk levels are. But second, it's going to cost us as a town a considerable sum of money to cleanse our water of these elements at whatever level is determined to be safe. But it's important to not just take a number and say, that's a reasonable number. We know that the tests have been done, for example, on other animals, rats and others, and it's in the studies from the CDC. They're very clear. None of that I have read, and I have not read it extensively, has given us an indication as to how you get from the levels they were exposed to, which they agree are very high levels, to determining that 70 parts or 20 parts or whatever the X number is there is in fact a number that we should be concerned with. And that's something that we as a society should understand. How did you arrive at that? And why do we then decide that that's the number that we need to protect ourselves accordingly? And mine is fairly simple as a question. How did we arrive at that number? And if we can get an answer and understand how that was arrived at and what the implications are, then I don't think anybody's going to argue with the need to deal with it. I am concerned when I hear, well, we've got a number, but we don't know, nobody is quite sure how they arrived at that specific number. And that's what I think my question is, and I don't want to belabor the point any further at this stage. I would love to have an open dialogue with somebody at DEP, and I can see here there are a number of people noted at CDC and other places who have gone through these tests, but everything is at very high numbers, so I don't know how they arrived at these. There's another question I have, and that has to deal with baselines. We talked about it even in that meeting with the DEP, but there are, as yet, no baselines I'm aware of measurements throughout the entire state. And so that requires a lot of extensive testing. So we don't even know what we're dealing with, in my estimation. Now, maybe you have more than I'm aware of, as to what we're dealing with as a baseline and where we go as a state from there, if in fact it's determined that that baseline is far beyond what the standard should be to protect the citizens and the residents of the state. So, one thing leads to another, and that's all I'm looking at, is we look at the empirical data and draw conclusions from it in a realistic manner.
Mr. Chairman, if you're through the town administrator, we can set, if you give us permission, we will set that meeting up with the DEP as soon as possible.
Well, I think that's certainly something we'd like to work on, so we can get further dialogue, because even if we approve this grant application strategy, I think the clear message from the board is we want to understand this better, and we want to be sure that we're certainly in compliance, but that we're not just complying with something that turns out to be unnecessary. And I know that we are certainly committed to complying with the DEP standards as they are issued. We just need to understand them better, because we're not going to be in a situation where we're putting our citizens, our customers at risk, that's for sure. I guess I would ask, is there any comments from the public? Again, it's hard to tell from this screen if there's folks out there who would like to speak on the issue.
If it's just us.
I don't hear any, so at this, I guess I would like to turn the discussion to the board as to whether or not we feel as though we want to move forward with the request for this grant, to approve the grant application.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
While I agree with what Pete's saying in terms of getting more information and more data to solidly understand this and really what's required and how they arrive there, I think that's just two parts. I think it doesn't sound like there's much risk at all in going for this grant, so that at least we'd have some kind of vague idea in mind if everything does fall into place as it's been drafted. So we'd know what we'd be looking at least cost-wise if we do have to make changes to deal with this. the topic of the private customer with the private well is also something to consider, because we definitely want to make sure the information is given to everyone. We have the responsibility to handle our wells, but I would think that if this is really something serious, that everyone would probably want more information as well for their private residences, wells, what have you. So I'd be in favor of approving the grant process.
I'd just like to comment that it's important that we protect the citizenry, but we also have to recognize that the mandate may come down with this, that there is no reason not to move forward with the grant process, but we can do that concurrently with trying to understand more. So under no circumstances would I suggest that we not approve moving forward with the grant. My questions have to do more with, let's understand better what we might be in for and why. The why behind it is of great interest to me. And I think your last points where if in fact this turns out to be a number that is backed up with a lot of evidence, then individual well owners are probably going to be interested, and that brings up a whole nother factor of how we have to interpret this. I mean, one could extrapolate right on down at that point to, do we check the Charles River and its tributaries for this? And what happens if you swim in some of these places? Are they being tested in the event that you ingest some of the water? I would figure one drop in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools, it doesn't take much if you're near a drainage area to consider what the implications could be to any number of bodies of water in the state. So it's of interest to me beyond just the scientific side. It's a protection of the citizenry of the state.
I think that certainly makes sense, and I'm going to ask either Kirsten or Betsy, just very briefly, as I understand it, the standards that are applicable to municipal water systems are, without question, in multiple ways, much more restrictive than what a private well would be able to pump. And at this, I mean, the example has always been, there's a well right by the Anhope property where water is pumped for private use, lots of pools and whatnot. But there would be no way that well could be used for public drinking water because it's too close to Route 101. So if you could is there any comments you could make about just the standards that apply to private versus public? Or it's more, what is the public system generally being required to do to protect the customers broadly?
If the private well serves at least 25 customers, I mean, there's other private wells that are not, your wells are community wells. So those are larger wells that serve a,
right.
Residential community and a business community. There's other technically public water systems, but they're either transient, non-community, or non-transient. There's a couple of the classifications. It could be, so I'm not familiar with the well that you're referring to. But
well, I was more, there's a couple of wells. There are wells that are used for commercial purposes, which we couldn't use in the municipal water system. But there are also hundreds of Millis properties that get water from their own private well.
Yeah, I mean, a private well, that's your Board of Health regulates how those wells are installed and their initial installation, or during transfer of properties. But other than that, the homeowner, it's up to them to, get their water tested and make sure it's okay periodically. Or, some people probably don't even think about it over the years.
But that begs the question, test it so it's okay. Well, we're talking about what defining okay means. It's the bigger system. So what I'm trying to get at is, I do think this has implications more broadly than the municipal wells, but once we start opening the conversation to private wells, there's a whole, this is just the tip of the iceberg in the way they are regulated. So I think personally it makes ultimately good sense for us to go ahead and get the grant application underway. There seems to be limited financial exposure, and we'll just know more. We'll be able to make some better informed decisions down the road, no matter how this plays out.
Just one final comment on that, Mr. McCaffrey. We've talked a lot about, some of the other items that the town has already committed to, like your asset management program, and ultimately updating with your water master plan, which really also does speak to what, you were just talking to around total demand and whether or not it becomes more users on your system as a result of any of this. One of the things that we certainly have thought about with respect to the development of the scope on this is to be able to leverage everything that's done here is not solely and only valuable with respect to potentially designing that facility. It's information that will get rolled into the asset management work. It's information that will become part of the baseline understanding of the condition of some of your water system assets for the purposes of the master plan. So, there's lots of value to be gained through this grant opportunity, looking at the PFAS as well. But we really do think it very much is in line with the investments the town's been making towards better management of their infrastructure overall, and knowing what it is you're dealing with. What's the condition of the infrastructure? What's the condition of the natural assets as well? So I think from our perspective, when we came across this opportunity and looked a little bit at where you stood with respect to DEP right now, it really felt like a good opportunity for the town at a timely time.
Well, okay, I think we've had a good discussion on this. I'd like to move to determine whether the board is going to support or direct the town administrator and the DPW director to work with Kleinfelder in developing this grant application for PFAS remediation.
Second.
So I guess I made a motion and it's been...
Sounded like a motion.
Close enough.
This is, okay, well, we'll go with it.
We'll go with that.
So any further discussion? I'll poll the board to vote on the recommendation to proceed with the grant application. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Ms. Underhill?
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. The motion is carried. So thank you to Kirsten and Betsy and Jim for bringing it forward. So we'll work with you folks to get the grant application going, and we'll learn more as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you, Ms. Underhill, virtually. Hopefully we get a chance to meet you in person. Mr. Germain, Mr. McCaffrey, thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch, Jim.
Thank you. And Kirsten,
with my missteps on the technology.
and Kirsten, I just asked if you could just email the PowerPoint directly to me. That would be
I will
great.
email that to you right now.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And Aaron, I will forward you the information that the other two board members have up to date.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very
All right,
much. Have a great evening.
Good evening. We'll move to the next item on the agenda. There's really two items that relate to the town meeting. One item is, at least with respect to preliminary decisions, we have 17 warrant articles that are going to be presented at the town meeting on next Monday. Typically, as a board, what we will do is assign members of the board to be responsible for not necessarily presenting on the article, because that's typically done by the Finance Committee, but nevertheless being responsible for responding to questions that are directed to the Select Board. I think we've found in the past that by doing that, we don't waste any time fumbling around trying to determine who's going to answer the questions, and we give the board members the opportunity to be prepared in case questions arise. So with that,
Mr. Chair, sorry, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to throw this out here, but do with it what you will. There's one more item for the DPW on here. I didn't know if you wanted to take that up prior to this.
No.
No. Fair enough.
And it's not out of spite. I just want to get this out of the way, and hopefully we'll move quickly.
Totally fine. So
I
you,
don't know.
warrant articles.
In fairness, we don't want to necessarily request that Erin be responsible for too many of these, although she wrote most of them, in fact. So,
I was merely an editor.
yeah, well, I think that we can go through it quickly, and if anyone is interested in speaking to it, then again, this is just, you're going to be responsible for answering any questions or trying to respond to questions from the floor, because I believe that we're pretty much in sync, that the Finance Committee is supporting most of these, not all, the warrant articles. So it'll be just a way of making sure that we're able to respond to citizen questions as quickly as possible. So that being said,
And
I've got the 17 articles.
which
First
I-
one, unpaid bills, really easy one. Be happy to take that one. Additional wages and expenses, that's really just an article that is about things that are left over to be paid. And so,
And Jim, Mr. Chairman, as I may, that will likely pass over that article, assuming the Finance Committee approves the interdepartmental transfers.
okay, so that'll be a motion to dismiss.
Yes.
Okay. Then, of course, we have Article 3, the operating budget.
I definitely do not want 3.
I think as chair, I should take the point on that. I don't know, Mr. Germain, if you'd be willing to speak to the next 3 enterprise fund articles in the event that there's questions that come up from the enterprise on the enterprises.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to talk to each one of those 3.
Okay, so we'll have Mr. Germain be the spokesperson for the board on sewer, water, and stormwater enterprise. Now, the consent agenda, that one is a little more interesting because of the way it's structured.
Mhm.
I don't know, Erin, if you feel comfortable speaking to that, I mean, you did put them
I
together.
lumped it together, yep. Yeah, I can be prepared to do that.
Okay. The audit, simply, no, it's not a big deal. I mean, I can take that. If we have questions about the audit, we're never going to get out of there. Now, the capital items, I'm happy to speak to it as the representative of the board on the capital planning committee. It's not that I'm assigning here, but I'm kind of guiding conversation. I mean, computer leases.
That's a school.
I wouldn't mind that one.
Okay.
Who's going to take that?
Me.
The capital project, this is the whether or not we're going to approve, I'm sorry, Article 11 deals with moving the some excess expense from the prior projects and devoting them to the DPW project.
Yeah, it was about 135,000 or something like that.
Maybe, Pete, you could address that.
Okay.
Okay, Article 12, that's a pretty significant item, which is the water tower. I think, Mr. Germain, you are our representative on the Drinking Water Committee, is that right?
You know, I don't remember who was appointed. I honestly don't.
Hasn't met in
Right.
3 years. So.
Yeah.
I'm fairly
But I
sure
get
it's
the
you,
impression
Pete.
that I'm being asked to become immersed in
You're
this.
the enterprise person, right?
Yeah.
And this is enterprise.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to reconsider my vote earlier.
The CPA projects, I think our prior chair was our representative on the Community Preservation Committee.
I can give it a shot if you'd like.
Okay,
You want me to do 13 and 14?
yes.
Okay.
Board of Assessors, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, those are fairly routine items. So I can take those.
Yeah. We handle that.
Okay, so basically that's the allocation. You could notify us that what we said is what we're going to do. We always have the opportunity the night before or the night of to make a little adjustment, but I just feel as though we're better off in presenting clear, concise, and direct responses. And the last thing we want to do is, look confused. Now, that doesn't mean that the town administrator is off the hook. If it gets really dicey, we can always bounce it to you or the finance director. So,
Mr. Chairman, who had item 8?
That would be the chair,
That was,
the independent audit.
that's just the audit. You can have it, Pete, if you want.
no, I don't really care. I'm trying to make a note here of who has these.
Pete, I'll send a list to the whole board tomorrow of what you voted, or what you chose, or what the
Okay.
chair appointed.
Okay. All right, let's talk briefly. Mr. Kaczynski, you can sort of go over for us and the public in particular some of the preparations we're doing for the annual town meeting, which is going to be held next Monday night at 7:30 at the high school gymnasium.
Correct.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board is aware and has participated in trying to prepare for our town meeting, I was going to say this spring, but now it's this summer, in this unique COVID-19 era that we're in. Most towns have either have postponed their town meetings, and many have moved their location of their town meetings to better accommodate the town meeting members or participants in light of the social distancing and personal protective equipment that we want to put forward for protection of the public at the town meeting, which we are still moving ahead with and trying to get this completed before the end of the fiscal year. And through a collaboration with the former town moderator and the newly elected town moderator, the town council, town clerk and her staff, the school facilities manager, the health director, the finance committee chair, and the members of this board and others who have all participated in trying to prepare for this, have arranged for the town meeting to occur, as mentioned, at the high school gymnasium. We have had several walkthroughs in preparation for this. We will have staff available to help guide individuals into the gymnasium. Town meeting members will be guided to a seat in the gymnasium when they enter I keep wanting to say auditorium, but it's gymnasium. And we will have a traffic flow in and out of the gymnasium to try to limit close contact between individuals. We will be asking everyone to wear a face mask and keep social distance in the gymnasium. And we will have areas set up for non-residents or non-voters as usual, as well as spacing in the front of the gymnasium for the town officials that are involved, the town moderator, the town clerk, town council, key town staff, and members of the finance committee and the select board. We will have a sign-in at the entrance to the gymnasium. We will set it up at 3 different tables, again, to try to limit any bunching up of voters as they come into the gymnasium, and try to smooth the flow again of people when they come in to vote, as well as when they leave. We will also plan on, at the conclusion of the meeting, having the town meeting voters leave in stages again and ask them to depart the gymnasium promptly afterwards, again, to avoid any bunching up of people or having any issues there. So, and again, the as was mentioned earlier, the town meeting warrant has been reduced to just the critical time-sensitive articles, with the hopes that we can keep the town meeting on a shorter timeline. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a rough overview. If I missed anything, I anticipate others may cover any gaps in my overview.
Just to add, Mr. Chair, that the full town meeting warrant is available on the homepage of the website for anyone who wants to take a peek.
Oh, very good. And folks should have received the Finance Committee report as well. That's already gone out. So thank you, Mr. Kaczynski, for going over that. We're hopeful that we will be able to efficiently move through the town meeting. We are sensitive to people's public health, and we are certainly committed to making this as free as we can. And if you want to attend the town meeting, please work with us so that if there is a little bit of a line getting in the building, we'll keep social distance outside the building as well as inside of the building. And in terms of wearing masks, we just urge folks to do that. And I think it's in your interest and in everybody else's interest to do it. Okay, the next item we have on our agenda is an item relative to a DPW radio contract. Mr. Kaczynski and Mr. McKay, which one of you wants to go forward? And
Let Mr. Kaczynski go first.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to give a brief background of this, this item, I think the origin of this, and certainly Mr. McKay can fill in some pieces afterwards, originated with the fact that the different radio bands that are used by the different departments have gone through a lot of changes over the past, I'd say 5 to 7 years. The bandwidth and the radios that were used by the DPW are no longer operational and usable by the department. And there's been a period of time where we have had an over-reliance on cell phones of individuals in the department that are not always reliable. And I believe right now we have 4 cell phones issued to the departmental staff, but those are mostly for the workers that are on call, as well as some senior staff in the department. Otherwise, we do have some individuals using their own personal cell phones for communication, and this has created some operational and safety concerns in regards to the department. And I know that in my discussions with the director, we thought it best to, and in discussions with the DPW union, we thought it best to look at a project to establish a new radio system within the DPW, which can communicate with dispatch, can communicate with all the other branches of town government that utilize a radio system. We thought this would be the most effective way to communicate. We also discussed the new laws involving cell phones and how drivers are no longer allowed to use cell phones when they're driving on the road. Police and fire personnel are exempt from that law, but DPW personnel are not. So it would also add time, oftentimes, where someone would have to pull over and talk on the phone before they can travel again. And looking at the cost of cell phones versus the radios. Currently, the town pays about $100 per month per cell phone through the town, different town plans. I believe, Jim, we're looking at about 12 employees.
Right. Yes.
So even if you utilize the current phones, that would still require, if we were to properly have our communicate with each other at all locations, it would require an additional 8 phones at approximately $1,200 per year per phone. So that's about $10,000 per year in order to outfit the staff with cell phones. And basically, we brought that information to the Capital Committee, and the Capital Committee did review the project. I think most of the members of the Capital Committee felt that it was a project of some urgency that needed to move forward for both safety and operational reasons. In its original past the Capital Committee, it did not quite make it to the recommended funded articles. Part of that reason, or I would say, obviously we have, we have a financial crunch right now, but at the same time, we're focusing mostly on the safety issues, and I believe that the board at your last, or one of your recent meetings did approve this to move forward with the understanding that because of the general fund restrictions for next year, we would utilize available funds from this year to fund the general fund portion of this project. So what's before you tonight is a phase 1 of the contract, which would be for the purchase of radio equipment through the general fund in the amount of $18,333. And I would recommend that the board's vote this evening for authorizing me to execute a contract be contingent upon the town meeting approving the other portions of the funding, which would be the FY21 water and sewer funds within the capital article. So I'm sure there was a quick way to explain that, but I tried to cover all the bases here. Mr. Chairman, if I may just ask Mr. McKay to cover any other issues that I might have overlooked in that review.
Well, thank you, and you've covered it all. It's basically the communication issue that we have. So right now, the system, it's 50, 60 years old. It's a low band system, and when the police station moved into their when they took the radio system with them, we used to be able to communicate with dispatch at all times because they had the radio based in the old fire station. That no longer. They never brought that radio system with them. And the company that actually took care of the fire, DPW, and school, he went out of business, he retired, and there is no one around that would take over that type of system. So the school system, they just migrated to the same type of system that we're looking to install in all DPW vehicles, and they will be able to communicate for the first time through everything. We'll all be able to, dispatch will be able to communicate with DPW, the school buses, police, fire, and certain vehicles will be able, myself, and maybe the general foreman will be able to communicate with both chiefs and their vehicles in the school's director, which we've never been able to do that previously. So, another thing that just popped up this week, there's at the water tank on Walnut Street, that's where the repeaters are for the police and fire and the school. The fire antenna is going to be replaced this coming July. And as he's going to replace that, we could see some savings, on the second phase of this, because he will install both antennas at the same time. What that savings is, I don't know that quite yet. But if he installs both antennas at the same time, you'll just be going up there once, to do both. And it is the first time that I think that anything in this town that we've actually had this, other than the cleaning, the cleaning company, we have one cleaning company now. This is probably the second thing that would be serviced by one company. It's the same company that services police, fire, and schools. What you have in front of you, I did give you a 30B form that authorizes the town administrator to sign the contract. Where the funding's going to come from, we know that there's $13,000 something left over in the snow and ice budget. That's where a good chunk of that will come. And then as we go on to the end of next week, we'll know where the rest of the funds will come out of the general fund. If the funds aren't there, then we just won't, he won't sign the contract. And we'll have to wait till, November. And we'll have to deal with this wasn't a union issue. Most importantly, when we were negotiating, it was brought back to the board and the board approved this. The union proposed it's all out there, so we can discuss it now, that they wanted a stipend for all their cell phones because of the use that they've been having with it. And myself, the town administrator, and the previous chair felt that it would be best that we look into a radio system that we're not paying them what they were asking for the uses of their private cell phones. And most importantly, the town administrator touched on the new law, the hands-free law. I mean, it's for every one of us. It's other than police and fire. You cannot use your cell phone. And, after so many issuances of getting caught driving with, using your cell phone, these are CDL drivers. People like myself who carry CDL licenses, there's a higher fine rate on something like that. If we lose our CDL license, you can't perform your job. So I would ask for support in this. And again, if the funds just aren't there by the end of next week, before town meeting, then we just won't be able to fund the project.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question, then I'll ask my colleagues for them to get the opportunity to ask questions. Either Jim or Ms. Bogazinski, give me some insight onto how common it is in other towns around that we operate what I would call a unified centralized dispatch system for police, fire, school, and DPW. What's sort of the state of industry, if you will?
So I think that most towns through their emergency response, the radio systems are handled that way. But with the same type of radio, I don't know what other towns do, but I know that this system, we could actually go back to being, so when dispatch gets a call, if it's after hours or something, they can just dispatch it right out to the on-call person if they're already here on the road. Or the snow and ice problem, they can do that also.
And what happens today when that dispatch has to come in the middle of the night?
So what happens is they call the on-call phone, and if they don't get the on-call caller, they call me, and then I'll have to go through the superintendent. So it's a phone call, and if somebody, that's how it's dispatched right now.
So it's not dispatched by the dispatcher, it's dispatched by basically DPW management team.
No, sorry, so after hours, the phone call comes into dispatch.
Okay.
And then it gets dispatched, through a phone call.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, sorry. Mine is just a quick and hopefully easy one. Are these only for inside the vehicle, or can they take it with them when they get out?
There's 4 handheld radios that are a part of it.
Okay.
So most of them, so the majority of the 20-something radios will be, built right into the vehicle, yes.
And only for use while they're in there. So any other communication, they'd have to go back to the vehicle to
Correct.
communicate.
That's.
I have a few questions, if I may, observations. First of all, are there any additional operating costs if we go with one of these providers?
So if we sign on with this provider, I believe there's a contract with the police and fire that naturally we would have to, sign on to that also, yes.
Right, but how much is that going to cost us?
As of right now, we don't have that cost.
Okay, so you're asking us to move forward with something we don't know the operating costs of at this stage. I mean, we know what it's going to cost to own the equipment,
Yep.
but the maintenance and the operating costs have not been factored in as yet.
That would come out of the budget expenses line
I
item.
understand, but we don't know what that number is. So.
I don't have the budget right in front of me. I believe the cost is in the original budget. I'm at home right now, so I do believe it is in there.
Understand. Secondly, the maintenance, will there be a maintenance cost for this? Not just operating, but maintenance.
So, excuse me, so there will be a maintenance cost. There will be no operational cost, no.
So
There'll be a license fee at the beginning, and that's already built into the budget.
but we don't, you don't remember.
I do have that. I don't have it in front of
No,
me.
I understand.
So it's part of the budget. It's part of the $55,000.
I guess part of what's bothering me is it sounds like we're looking at a loophole where we don't want people driving with cell phones operating for their own safety as well as the safety of others on the road. But you're basically saying, if we can get these radios in the car, then they can operate. But I would tell you, I don't see any difference in terms of potential risk for somebody operating a radio versus a cell phone, particularly when they're voice activated. So from my perspective, and I'm just giving you my perspective, I look at it and say, we have to build an infrastructure. We have operating costs, which are going to be something, I don't know what they are, and maintenance. And we could, in fact, probably negotiate a contract, whether it's with Verizon or whomever, for the 10, 12, or whatever the number of cell phones is. Then they have something they not only have in the vehicle, but they can take out of the vehicle with them. They can have voice activated, calling dispatch. Dispatch in turn takes care of calling whoever else has to be called. I watch that at the police station day in and day out when I'm working there more than I'd like to. So I'm beginning to come to a feeling that if we set up a guideline in the town that says you will not operate a radio or a cell phone, with the exception of police and fire, in a moving vehicle, which probably is prudent. But just let me finish. My view, and this is my view, is we're dealing with safety issues. That's why the state passed laws on use of cell phones in moving vehicles. And to get around that, to put in a radio, is a concern to me. Because, again, it's the safety of the driver, the individuals in the vehicle, and the others on the road. So it sounds to me like I have more flexibility by having 10 or 12 or whatever the number is of cell phones, negotiating a contract. The town owns them. They are responsible in the town. They're distributed out as needed. And you have all the communications you could possibly want with those. They're totally voice activated if you want. You could put an earbud in, I don't care. But the point is, everything is hands-free if you need it to be. And all we do is say, fine, you've got the communications you need. And with those, you can communicate to other vehicles and so forth through the dispatch, because it can be done. I guess I don't understand the need for a radio infrastructure under those conditions.
So a radio system is a communication system. So what we're trying to do is communicate from a DPW dispatch, whether it's out of the DPW office. State law does not allow us to use cell phones in our vehicles.
When you're moving.
Well, let's, gentlemen, we're going to go through the chair here. So, let Mr. McKenna respond.
So the idea of running a radio system that's in every vehicle that the town owns, whether it's a school bus or police vehicle, a fire vehicle, I don't know what the difference be going. And you can use the radio system by law in the vehicle.
Mr. Jermaine?
I have a problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I have a problem with, if you can't use a cell phone on a moving vehicle, I don't see how you can justify then, from safety perspective, using a radio.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mr. Jermaine, is that what you're looking for, is to eliminate the entire radio system through the Millis Public Schools the Millis Fire Department, and the Millis Police Department.
I am looking at what's before us, which is the DPW right now.
Yeah, well, this is clearly an issue around what we have in front of us, which is the strategy for providing communication to the DPW, basically. That's what we're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, Mr. Kaczynski.
Yes, I would say in this case, the issue of a moving violation or for using a cell phone while driving is an added reason to move forward with this, but not necessarily the primary one. To be quite honest, I've never actually worked in a community that didn't have a DPW department that had a centralized radio system that did connect with dispatch and could communicate to many individuals at once, whether it be directly or through dispatch for emergencies, for issues, whether it be during snow plowing, during hurricanes, during any kind of major repair projects where there is just much easier communication between the DPW and the police and fire departments. Certainly in a sense, the DPW is part of an emergency response team when you do have major events. And I certainly understand the concern for the cost. There was a large upfront cost with this purchase. But I believe in the long run, from a cost perspective, it will pay dividends to the town over the long haul, and I believe that it is certainly in the best interest of the town to have a system that allows not only the police and fire and schools, but its DPW department to communicate effectively with all the other services. And I certainly appreciate the cost implications, but I agree with the director that I think it is the best path for the town overall moving forward. And I think it is worthy of moving forward with the project. I certainly agree that we should come back to the board with what the cost implications are for the maintenance, any maintenance agreements. But I also agree that I think in the long run, the cost of this system will pay dividends because I think in the long run, it'll ensure the safety and better operation of the town employees and its residents. So, I agree with, that there are certainly questions that we certainly can work on getting additional answers to. But I think certainly as far as the town's concerned, this is the best way to go, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Thunderhill?
I just have a question for clarification. So is what Mr. McKay was saying, was it that the cell phone use is illegal in your vehicle, in like the town vehicles, even in a hands-free mode, in that the radio method is legally approved?
So the state law is for anybody that if you have a hands-free, you can use it in your vehicle. Okay. We only have one vehicle, actually two vehicles, mine and the general foreman's, DPW superintendent. His vehicle can tie a phone system into it. Mm-hmm. Every other vehicle, none of them have that. And a two-way radio system is not defined in that law as being illegal.
Well, I would just like to state that, the way I'm looking at this is this proposal to basically revamp large number of large vehicles that are the DPW vehicles so that we can have communication with staff while they're operating the vehicles. They can be deployed from a centralized dispatch center in the event of emergency or whatnot. And honestly, conceptually, I think it's important for us to have that kind of capability, I'll call it, built into our vehicles. And the thing about cell phone that troubles me, of course, it is portable, yes, but I don't want to be in a situation where, we're called out to an emergency, the DPW employee is rushing to a water main break and forgets to pick up his cell phone, as opposed to being in a vehicle where there's guaranteed connection with the dispatch office as well as the director and or the foreman. So to me, an installed radio system, I'm not arguing for this one, but I mean, just conceptually makes more sense to me than, a handheld device. I just, that's the way I look at it. So, I don't know, Sandra, I think I interrupted you there. Sorry about that. Something else you wanted to?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the only concern I have is, at that point, a cell phone could just easily be installed in a vehicle. We can assign them. They're not supposed to leave the vehicle. You can put in something like a jabber or whatever, and they'll operate hands-free totally in that vehicle. All you have to do is say, call so-and-so, dispatch, whatever, and you have full communications. In fact, the beauty of that is you've got a full cell phone series of communication towers as opposed to any one link that could conceivably go down. I just don't see the downside other than getting around the concept of holding it in your hand if the vehicle's moving. But if you are hands-free, you still have all the assets there and then some, because you now have the ability to go beyond just what a fixed radio would permit. So I think that there are benefits beyond the standard radio that would go with a cell phone setup, which is partly why I'm leaning in that direction. I don't deny I understand the radio system. It makes sense up to a point, but I think we've got newer technologies that do that, and that's what I'm looking at right now.
Well, at this point, we're looking at either the board taking action to support this or deferring it to our meeting on Monday, where we might get more information about operating costs. I'm willing to go in both directions. We just have to get this decided upon before we go into town meeting. I mean, there is another opportunity for us to take a crack at this. My reaction is that what is being proposed, and believe me, I am not a technology person, as well known. What is being proposed sounds to me like an integrated communication system, which is being provided to the Department of Public Works, similar to the one we're using in other departments. So, and the other solution sounds jury-rigged to me. But that's coming a little bit from ignorance. But that's kind of where I look at it. More than happy to take a motion tonight, or if the sense of the board is we'd like to see additional figures, we can do it next week. But I would anticipate that we will decide this before town meeting, one way or the other.
I'd like an opportunity to at least get the figures on operating costs for comparison purposes and anything else that we, the maintenance, operating, whatever, so we can put it all together and think about it as one integrated system either way.
All right, is it possible, Mr. Gazinski and Mr. McKay, to put together some additional detail?
I can send you out probably once I get off the computer here, I can send you out the costs that Mr. Jermaine's looking for. What I cannot get is a cost probably for 25 units that Mr. Jermaine is speaking about. I don't know where I would even think of getting a cost.
I think that the question that's being presented is, I know that the operating costs are included in the budget. I think what we're asking, what is being asked, is not only the acquisition cost, but maintenance contracts, whatever it is, annual cost.
You're looking for the annual operational and or maintenance costs for the...
Of this proposed system, right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think we can sounds like we...
Sure we can.
Okay, why don't we do that, and then we can try to, and then we will at least bring it to a vote one way or the other on Monday night. Because it's important for us to do that, because if the board is not supportive of this particular item, then it's probably not going to be supportive of the warrant article, which includes a capital cost for the balance of the program. So let's defer it and decide it early on Monday. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is tree removal funding. This is an item that Mr. Jermaine has requested to be put before the board this evening, so I will leave it to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard from Mr. McKay and I don't remember Bruno's last name, and I apologize.
Mr. Cantareggi.
Cantareggi, right. I apologize, but at any rate, we heard from them the other night, and they pointed out that there are, and Mr. McKay will correct me, I'm sure, but somewhere between 300 and 500 trees that need to be probably removed for our own safety in the town. They do pose a safety, they're dead. We got a very good rate from the company that's doing the work of approximately $200 a tree, as I recall, to remove trees. And Mr. Cantareggi very much recommended that if we could fund it, it would be approximately $60,000 or $65,000. And again, Mr. McKay, you can give me the more exact figure, but somewhere in that range to get these trees removed, which for a variety of reasons probably makes a lot of sense. It was for that reason that I wanted to bring it up with the board tonight and for discussion, because I feel that they do, as now that they're dead, they now pose a risk to drivers and others in the community for limbs falling. Over time, the trees are going to begin to rot. We're going to see more and more problems with them, and the sooner we could take care of that problem, the better. I realize that we've got a very tight budget, but perhaps we can begin it by parsing out and hopefully commit enough so that we can get the vast majority of these trees removed over the next year. I don't know what it takes to do that, Mr. McKay, so other than the budget, I can't comment on time frames or anything.
Very well stated. I think that everything you stated was correct. It was 300 to 500 trees. The cost is exactly correct when you take that many down. Luckily, we are under contract with it's a consortium of two companies, and the last $50,000 was spent on taking down, I think it was almost at 250 to 300 trees. And yes, if we get the funding, we could get that done before winter falls. And yes, we could hire the guy because he's running. We don't have to put it out to bid.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yeah, I would recommend, certainly if there are trees that over the next 6 months are in immediate danger of either coming down or large branches coming down, I would certainly think we could, short term, meet with the tree warden to arrange to have those trees removed and just we'll find the funds necessary if it's that urgent a matter on the short term. But then at the fall town meeting, to have a capital article at the fall town meeting for the balance of whatever is needed to bring the town really up to where we need to be on the tree maintenance and addressing any dangerous trees. I think that certainly could be made a priority for the fall town meeting. And then again, I'm not an expert on when the best time for trees to come down, but I do believe they do take trees down through the winter as well. So I think that, we could do some of the more urgent tree removal over the next 6 months, and then after the fall town meeting, have a program to remove the rest of the trees that need to be addressed. That'd be my recommendation at this point.
Mr.
Jermaine?
Mr. Buzinski, could you give me some idea or give us some idea of what the funding requirement, at least to take us through the fall town meeting, might be so that we could make sure you have, I know you've cut your budget and pared it to a pretty tight level, so and maybe Mr. McKay has some idea. I would like to be able to say, we recommend some amount for this.
Yeah, I know that, if I may again, Mr. Chairman, I know, and I'm sure the director will confirm this, we did have to make a number of cuts across the board, including some expense cuts into the into the DPW budget. So their budgets are fairly tight. Having said that, again, I would be certainly willing to meet with the tree warden as well as the director to review the situation of any urgent trees that need to come down. And you know, we can certainly, whether it be, you know, later in the summer, finding funds, either leveraging against the current DPW budget with the idea of getting funds approved at the fall town meeting, or whether it be some type of reserve fund transfer if an emergency comes up to address the trees in the summer and in the fall. Again, I think that the bulk of that 65,000 estimate would need to come at the fall town meeting, and you know, with a further discussion with the tree warden, we can determine the urgency of any trees that need to be taken down prior to that time.
As long as it doesn't come out of the IT budget.
Yeah, I don't think there's not much to remove out of there anyway. But I do think that we can address any short-term issues, emergency issues with the tree warden, and we can certainly figure out a way to fund between now and November any trees that really need to come down.
Well, I agree that it's an issue, and I agree that the issue is one that requires a funding source. So I think at this stage of the game, based upon the budget process we've been going through for months, the best we can do in the short run is to try and address the emergency situations from the existing budget, but then develop, you know, a funding mechanism in the fall town meeting once we have free cash certified and whatnot. Maybe the timing is not ideal, but at this stage of the game, I think we need to live within the budget proposal we've already made, and this one is going to have to be a workaround. I don't know, Aaron, if you have any thoughts you'd like to share.
No, I'm listening intensely and agreeing with everyone so far.
It'd be great to take down this piece if we had the money to do it.
Exactly.
All right. So, I mean, I guess that I would ask, you know, the town administrator working with the, you know, the folks involved, you know, if we could have an update, let's say in September, as to where we stand, and including the tree warden. We'd like to work together to try and solve this problem. And if we find as though we really need to reach out and do something with reserve fund or whatnot before fall town meeting, then we can do that. But at this point, I think that's where we have to go. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is the always fun and exciting water, sewer, stormwater commitments. Mr. Gazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in your packet are the stormwater utility commitments, as well as the water and sewer department commitments for approval by the board. With the intention not to bore anyone with these commitments, I'd ask if there's any questions from the board in regards to the approval of these commitments.
The one thing that I wanted to bring out here, which I think, you know, will require a separate vote, is this stormwater utility bill for property at 24 Federal Street and the condo located at Tuckerdale Way.
Correct. Those were missed and not sent at the time, so they were created and mailed later in January. So the treasurer is requesting, as part of that, the board to approve those invoices as well.
So we already billed the homeowner or the property owners. They've paid their stormwater bill. And now it's sitting somewhere. We want to move it to from the collector's account to the stormwater account. Is that right?
I believe that to be the case, yes.
Okay. So really is the fiscal year 2020 commitment for stormwater, which we have in front of us.
Yes.
Okay, I would make a motion that the board approve the stormwater commitment to transfer utility commitment to the collector of $2,013 for the stormwater for fiscal year 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the board approve the stormwater commitment to collector. Questions from the board members? If not, I'll poll the board. Mr. Germain?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Motion is carried. We have one thing here that says signatures. How are we going to deal with signatures?
That's an excellent question.
Well, you find out the answer and let us know.
I will confer with others, and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
And we have March.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me. We have March and May of the water sewer
Yes.
collector. I
Motion.
move that we agree on the amounts of March for $3,083.53, and for May, if I may, also for $3,290.61 for the collector.
Second?
So it's been moved and seconded that the board approve the water sewer department commitment to the collector for March of 2020 in the amount of $3,083.53, and the water sewer department commitment to the collector for May of 2020 in the amount of $3,290.61. What happened to April?
I don't see it.
You already approved April, so
Already
you
did
are
April.
good. Somehow we missed March, so just
So
need
it's
to
been
do
moved
it.
and seconded. I'll poll the board. Mr. Germain.
Yes.
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Motion is carried unanimously. Okay, folks.
And then we have
At this point, the board is going to go into executive session. The executive session is for the purpose of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for and contract negotiations with non-union personnel, namely the town administrator and the finance director.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So we have one more here, the fourth quarter, May 2020, for
Did that.
water sewer commitment,
You did
Did
both.
that.
$67,809.
That one I don't have.
No, there are three altogether, Pete, so you did them all. You're all set.
Those are the three added up?
No, you already approved all three that were here.
Do you see the same document, though, the fourth quarter one?
Where am I
Yeah,
looking?
the
Hold
fourth quarter
on.
one is different, I'm sorry.
Hold on.
Okay.
You did the stormwater, right?
Right? We've
And then
done
you
two
did
of
the
them.
March 2020
Yep,
and the
Yeah,
May
2020.
2020.
and then the very last thing.
You're
in
right.
the
My
packet.
apologies. There is
Yes.
one last one, and that's the total quarter for
Right.
May,
You're
not
right,
the
Mr.
month.
Germain. Sorry about that. So I'll take
Doesn't happen often.
Look who's paying attention. Not us, apparently.
I move that we approve that for the collector in the amount of $67,809.01 for the fourth quarter.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the the water sewer commitment to the collector for the fourth quarter, the amount of $67,809.01. I'll poll the board. Mr. McCaffrey, yes. Mr. Germain,
Yes?
Ms. Underhill.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Now we'll vote to go into executive session. Again, we're going to be discussing contract negotiations with the town administrator and the finance director. The board will consider going into executive session. If we go into executive session, then we will emerge from executive session at the end solely for the purpose of adjourning the meeting. So I will poll the board going into executive session. Ms. Underhill, please.
Yes.
Mr. Germain.
Yes.
McCaffrey, yes. So with that, we will sign off on this Zoom meeting, and again, we will reconvene as a board in the executive session, and then adjourn the meeting. Thank you all,
Yes.
and thank you for joining the party, Ms. Underhill.
All right.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Right.